Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas Pedig Tes Halacha Beis. We're learning Daf Tzadik. We left off on Daf Tzadik, 7 lines from the top of the Amid. As we left off learning about brachas regarding the moon, we're going to have more brachas in connection to the new moon, which means brachas connected with Rosh Chodesh. We're going to learn the bracha that one has to make when you go through a Beis HaKfaris, the bracha on a rainbow, a lot on the bracha that we have to make on rainfall, even though we had a bracha in the Mishnah, Hatoiva HaMeitiv. We're going to actually have very different brachas, as we'll see in our sugya. We're going to have the concept of that there is a relationship between the upper waters and the lower waters, and much more. Mamash Gavaldik, Chever Daf Tzadik, Amid Aleph, 7 lines from the top of the Amid, and let us dive right in by the dot Betfilah. So says the Pnei Moshe, 4 lines from the top. What's the Betfilah? That I did the Ma'id Birchas Mechadish Chadashim. We just came off learning about what we call Kiddush Levana. So now the Gemara wants to know, what type of bracha do we make Betfilas Musaf Shal Rosh Chodesh? Aside of the first 3 and the last 3 that are common, but we have the middle bracha. How does it end? So that's the question of Betfilah. What's the nusach of the Musaf bracha of Rosh Chodesh? So we have different opinions. Rabbi Yossi Bar Nehorai says that we conclude the bracha with Baruch Ata Hashem Mekadesh Yisrael and Mechadesh Chadashim. Not the way we say it. Rabbi Chia Bar Ashi disagrees with Rabbi Yossi Bar Nehorai. We actually paskin like Rabbi Chia Bar Ashi, and the nusach is Mekadesh Yisrael v'Rashei Chadashim. That's the way we do it. And as the Pnei Moshe, we're going to learn a lot of Pnei Moshe today. 7 lines from the top of the Amid says that, you know why we don't say Mechadesh Chadashim? Why do we say V'Rashei Chadashim, which is what we do? Because the Al Harayv Adayin Ein Halavana Nidis Klal Rosh Chodesh. You know, just because that's something that we learned a lot in the Rambam, that the calendar was not made with a accurate Rosh Chodesh falls out on the Moilad. We actually know, like the Rambam says, that the Moilad can be 2 days before or 2 days later. And even if the Moilad is on Rosh Chodesh, from when the Moilad is visible until when we can actually see it, it's not the same time, as we learned extensively together. So Bekitzer, we can't say Mechadesh Chadashim because you might not be saying it. And the way we address that indirectly is by Dafka only saying V'Rashei Chadash. Says the Gemara Vayter, Shmuel Amar. Now this is mamash amazing. We don't paskin like Shmuel, but Shmuel says that Tzarech Leimer v'Hasiyenu, just like we have a Hasiyenu in both the Shachris and Musaf of Yomtiv and of Yomtiv, or Musaf of Cholamoyed v'Hasiyenu. He holds that Rosh Chodesh is such a Yomtiv that in the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh we have to add Bahasiyin. Rav says Tzarech lahaskir ba Zman. There are many pshatim in the Zman. Let's go. Today we're going to learn the Pnei Moshe. The Pnei Moshe says Zman is to say Batitein lanu Hashem Elokeinu v'Siyim Rosh Chodesh Hazeh. Batitein lanu. These are all nuschos that we have in the Yom Tov davening. And indeed, why do they hold so? Says the Gemara, because we have a Braisa by Rav Choshaya when it says in the creation, so let's gonna go again. There's many different pshatim. Let's go over here. That Braisa is saying the oisois refers to Shabbos, Mayadim refers to Yom Tov, Liyamim refers to Rosh Chodesh, and Shanim refers to what we learned about yesterday about the Kiddush Achama. The fact that the Torah juxtaposes Moyadim to Yomim, the fact that the Torah juxtaposes Yom Tov to Rosh Chodesh, that's why you have all these opinions that make the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh even more similar to the Musaf and to the Shachris and to the davening of Yom Tov. And Bachlal, really, Rosh Chodesh, as we know, would have been a bigger Yom Tov. The Yom Tov was taken away from us because of the Chet HaEgel, being that none of the women participated in the Chet HaEgel. None of them participated. They were gifted with the Yom Tov of Rosh Chodesh, and as Chasidus explains, what's the connection? Because the Egel Hazav is Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah, in a refined way, is not a person who's denying God, but they give too much koyach to anything other than God. What's the moon? The moon We all know the moon has no light of its own, which is why when the moon, the part of the moon that's facing the sun is not facing us, we don't see any of the moon. When we see moonlight, we know we're seeing the sunlight. Elamad, the moon is reflecting the sun. And that's the emes. The emes is that there's only one koyach, so to say, the sun, which is representing over here God Almighty, representing God Almighty. It looks to me like the boss has koyach over you, nature has koyach over you, other people up there. This is only the moon. They're only reflecting the light of the sun. So they who understood that there is take einoid mulvadoi, they are more connected to the Levana, and therefore they celebrate Rosh Chodesh more than men. Now, moving in Ingan. The Gemara wants to know ha'over bein hakvares, that in the Babli, this question, this bracha, is made horoya beis hakvares. And here we don't say horoya beis hakvares, which would imply, according to the Babli, even if you're not in it, you just see it. Here in the Yerushalmi, it's only when you go through it. Baruch neman b'dvaroi umachaya hamesim. Neman b'dvaroi, as we have in Sanhedrin in Perek Chelik, when the Gemara begins over there, minayin the tchias hamesim min haTorah. So we have allusions like, for example, one of them is Az Yashid Moshe, Az Yashid Lashon Asid, that in the future Moshe will come back and will sing the final niggin with all of us, when Mashiach will come. So that's why V'neman b'dvaroi. It says so in the Torah, and God is trustworthy, and indeed it will happen. That we add also Hayudea Misparchem, that the one who knows how many you are, who Yo'ered Eschem, and who Yegale Es Ha'afer Me'alanechem, he'll remove the dust from upon your eyes. Until now, right? If people have the merit to be part of a Chevre Kadisha, preparing someone for burial, we put shards on the eyes, which is earth. And then, so to say, by Tchias HaMesim, we use this expression that God will remove the dust from upon our eyes. And the final version of the bracha that you make, when you, according to the Yerushalmi, when you go bein hakvaros, Rabbi Lazar b'shem Rabbi Chanina, that we say Asher Yotzar Eschem Adin, that we were created with the attribute of justice. V'chilkel Eschem Adin, that we were sustained Badin. V'silik Eschem Adin, that we were removed from this world also with justice. And also badin. And then he would say, this is already very similar to the bracha that we make. And look at the minor lashon to see the exact nusach. And here also, we only make this bracha if we were away from a Beis HaChayim for 30 days or more. We need an interval of 30 days, as we learned yesterday. Says the Gemara, all of the above regarding a bracha that we make, bein hakvaros, is only b'meisei Yisrael. Aval b'meisei umas ha'olam. There we also make a bracha, but we quote a pasuk in Yirmiyahu that reads that boisha imchem ma'oid chafra yiladetchem. Your mother is greatly ashamed. The one who bore you is disgraced because of the sinful existence of their children, referring to people that serve avodah zarah. Moving on to the next. Haraya hakeshes ba'anan. A person sees a rainbow in the clouds. By the way, this ba'anan is very important. Today you can have a sprinkler going off here in LA, and if you're standing in the right direction, you'll see a rainbow in it. The keshes that we are speaking about is in a dark cloud, is in a cloud. And that's the whole concept, that even when it's dark, in the darkness there's beauty. And God sees that beauty, which is why he doesn't bring them out. We say, Baruchato Hashem, Zoicher Habris. Rabbi b'shem Rabbi Yechanan, no, Neman bivrisoi and v'zoicher habris. How great is that, right? And then you have in the Babli the other nusach that zoicher habris, the Neman bivrisoi and the kayim b'mamare, which is exactly the nusach that we make when we see a rainbow. There's a whole debate whether you should avoid seeing a rainbow or not share a rainbow, because you can look at it with an ayin ra. You see the world should have gotten destroyed. Or you should share the rainbow with others, because Adarabah, you're seeing over here that no matter how bad most people might be, there's always the rainbow, that tzaddik, in whose merit God doesn't even want to destroy the world. And indeed, as the Gemara says, Rabbi Chizki b'shem Rabbi Yirmiyah, Kol Yomav Shel Rabbi Yechanan bar Yochai Lo Nira'aso Hakeshes Ba'anan, because he was the rainbow. Gewaldig. As the Pnei Moshe says, it says the Gemara, now that we mentioned the greatness, right? Rabbi Chizkiya b'shem Rabbi Yirmiyah about Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, kach hava Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai oimer, bika. He once had the koyach of going to a valley and calling out to the valley and demanding of the valley, goizer on the valley, his smali din reizov become filled with golden dinarim, and v'hoisam on the valley became filled up. And this is really something that's brought down in Medrash, the Hilim, that there was a student of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai that went on a trip and he made a lot of money, came back wealthy. And when one guy of the chevra became very wealthy, so many other of the Talmidim had a concept, maybe we should also go into this world of business and become very wealthy. And to address that, this is what he did. He went into this valley, and the miracle was that the valley was filled up with golden dinarim. And he told his Talmidim, here, you want to go into business to make geld? Here's all the money in the world. But they should know that all of the gold that they might take will be deducted from the gold they'll have somewhere in the future, or from a ruchnisdik gold that they get in another world, whatever it was that he told them. They didn't take that gold. The gold remained. People only know where the valley is. Okay, right. Says the Gemara, in Tulasin Inun. We have a very similar Gemara in the Bavli, but there, Bnei Aliyah. Here, the word is Bnei Ha'olam Haba. And by us, you have 36 in the Bavli. In the Yerushalmi, here we have now 30. If there are 30, I'm nobody binoin. My son, Elazar, and me, we're from the 30. And even if only in today Inun, if there are only two Bnei Ha'olam Haba, Ani Uberi Inun, it's going to be myself and my son. In other words, there are many levels of Bnei Olam Haba, and Abshim bar Yochai and the son was from the highest level. That you should know that Yikarev Avram min Gabei va'ad Gabai, that Avram Avinu has the power to intercede from all of the people that lived from his time until my time. And because of the schos of Avram Avinu, everyone is going to be taken off the hook. He'll be malamed schos on everyone. But Avram Avinu's koyach is only needed until my generation. But va'ano, now that God brought me into the world, I can be mekarev min gaboy va'atsoiv kol darei, from now until the end of time, meaning until Mashiach, I can intercede on behalf of everyone. No, it's the whole humanity. You can only say it. You have the world until Avram Avinu, but then you have Avram until Rav Shimon bar Yochai, and Rav Shimon bar Yochai until Mashiach Tzidkenu. And he says, and if my schus is not great enough to intercede, Rav Shimon bar Yochai, right, is speaking also about the future, those who came after him. Maybe they'll be terrible Rishoyim. So if my schus is not powerful enough, v'im lav, so yitztaref, I will connect myself, I will join with Achia Hashiloini Imoy. And now I can intercede on behalf of every single Jew. How great is that? And it's interesting that even though that Eliyahu Hanavi, Zachar Latoiv, is more commonly the tzaddik that comes of the holy Baal Shem Tov, the whole point of the Baal Shem Tov was making Ahavas Yisrael the center of Yiddishkeit. Ahavas Yisrael being the center of Yiddishkeit is exactly how you can intercede on behalf of. So it's amazing. So Rav Shimon bar Yochai says that if I cannot do it, I'm going to get the Achiyah Hashiloini that gives up insight. What's unique about him? Eliyahu Navi was judgmental. Eliyahu Navi was the one that told the Eibishter Kanaka, he was Mekana, he made a protest against the behavior of the Jewish people. Told God that the people stopped keeping the covenant. Achiyah Hashiloini, who was his teacher, right, was mamish the opposite in this context, and therefore him and Rav Shimon bar Yochai developed. Says the Gemara, Alag Shamim v'Alab Surais. This is going back to the Mishnah, that for rain and good news, you make the bracha hatoiv v'hameitiv. So the first kasha the Gemara asks is, "V'chima ro'u lismach b'soides toivus like shamim." In other words, as the Pnei Moshe asks, that the order in the Mishnah should have been the why? Because when shamim in Eretz Yisrael is not something that brings a blessing whenever it comes. There is the period for the rain, then rains are a bracha, and if it rains out of the season in Eretz Yisrael, as we just learned, it's a klala. We learned this in brachas. So, like it's like tada v'she'ena tada koidim. Soides toivos is always something good. So the Gemara wants to know, why did the Mishnah say al kshamim and then psuros toivos? The order, that's the way the Pnei Moshe explains the question, should have been the opposite. Answers the Gemara. The reason why the Mishnah writes that order, because the Mishnah is following the Seder of the Pasuk. And the Pasuk is in Mishlei al Shem, Mayim Kadem al Nefesh Hayefam. First, the Pasuk speaks about the awesomeness of water, particularly how cold water enlivens a weary person. Shmua Toiva Me'eretz Mercha is same as a good shmua of coming from a far land. So since in the Pasuk Mayim comes before the Shmua Toiva, the order of the Mishnah follows the order of the Pasuk. Whenever you have such an answer, the kasha on this type of answer is you didn't answer the question. You just placed the question in one step above. So now I have the same kasha in the Pasuk. In other words, based on the premise of the kasha, that psuros toivos should be before kshamim, before mayim. So why in the Pasuk is it reversed? And l'chura mayim represents chachma, and in the Sfiras, chachma is the first of the 10. So anything connected to water, indeed, has to come first. Okay, says the Gemara Vayta. Another question based on the premise that for rain to elicit a bracha of a hatoy v'hameitiv, which is the bracha in the Mishnah, it's not an any drizzle. It's going to be a couple of things. First, there has to be a certain quantity, minimum quantity of rain, and then there'll be a whole question. B'negeya, is it rain that came in the beginning of the season, or was it that there was a drought and there was fasting, and in response the rain came about? Only then do you make a bracha. But the first topic is how much rain is needed. So answers the Gemara, Rabbi b'shem Rabbi Yechanan. Batchila says the Pnei Moshe, and this is a topic that we have in Masechta Tainis and the Bavli, that during the rain season in Eretz Yisrael, there are really 3 rain cycles, first, second, and the third. Batchila means the first time that it's raining, it has to be a lot, kidei revia, and we will, God willing, get there today. The word revia is miloshin, cohabitation. It's an expression that is used concerning rain, because rain has to penetrate the earth for it to bring a bracha into the earth. So that's what the word kidei revia means. In other words, it's not enough for there to be a drizzle, but only the first of the 3. It has to be more rain than we'll see the latter 2. How much more? Enough for it to penetrate the ground. And the Gemara later is going to give more pratim, like a tefach, 3 tefachim, as we'll see so. So that is batchila, and that justifies the hatoy v'hamet. However, ubasoif, says the Pnei Moshe, basoif means both the second and the third period of the rain season. Even less rain is beneficial, and how much less? Even kedei sheyutchu panel, even if there's only enough that the surface of the ground is wet. It's like when you wash your face. You don't need the water to penetrate your face. You just need for the face to get wet. That's opinion number 1. Opinion number 2, Rabbi Yanai Bar Shmuel, in the name of Reb Shimon ben Lakish. In other words, what chaps, it's a machlokes Rabbi Yechanan and Lakish. Batchila, he agrees with Rabbi Yechanan. It's kedei revia. We'll get more details. Again, revia means enough for the earth to be penetrated with the rain. Ula basoif, meaning the second and the third period of the 3 periods. Kedei sheti shada hamagufa, enough that if the lid of a barrel would be soaked in it, it would dissolve. It would dissolve. And l'chura, that's a lot more rain than Rabbi Yechanan's rain. Now, just to know that when you have the classic earthenware utensils, the clay fettes that's fired up in a kiln, they don't dissolve. But clay adama, which was rare, clay adama means you took earth together, you dried it in the sun. Yes, they dissolve when they get wet. So the Gemara is asking, the yesh gufa nishreis, is there a lid that's soaked that dissolves? a cheres will not turn into the tzaddik amid base. The Gemara says, "Anachanami." Shlakish is not speaking to the fact that most lids were fired up in the killing. He's speaking about a lid that would not be fired in the killing. If the lid, right, would not be in a killing, it would be a normal clay adama, right? Something that only dried in the sun. The amount of rain needed, that will dissolve. Then you can make the bracha. And if it's less than that, if it's only enough rain to sheyutchu panel, according to Reish Lakish, you won't make the hatoy v'hameitiv. And now we have the third and final opinion. Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yoine v'Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, which is great. We know from Rabbi Yehuda, he was Talmud of Rav, and then he became a Talmud of Shmuel. So this Torah he got from Shmuel. That Batchila, everyone is agreeing, it's Kedei Reviyah. However, Ula Basoy, the second and third period, Afilu Kol Shahu, the minimum amount, he holds that already is enough. The blessing is great enough that we should react by making the bracha of Hatoiv Ba'ameitiv.
Do we do that now, Rabbi?
Oh, so now before we answer your question, let's go into other questions. The other question is, and that's very important, big machlokes over here, rain is a natural phenomenon. And is it that, so what, that it's a natural phenomenon? All right, we need sunlight. We're making bracha on the sun. It's like only once in 28 years, but we make the bracha over that. Whenever it rains, you make the bracha. If it fell enough, kedei reviyah, and the second and the third, whatever the opinion will be. However, Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rabbi Ze'eda, he holds that all of these brachas, when you have the right amount or more, it's only lahafsik tainus nemra. In other words, guys, this is a topic that we have in tainus, right? Let's go with the opinion that the people have to begin to fast. It's Rosh Chodesh Kislev cave in Eretz Yisrael, and it's still not raining. Even though Yechidim, if they want, they would begin to fast earlier. But let's go with that. So everyone is fasting. Remember that? You begin fasting by Bahab, 3 days, and then eventually it becomes a 7-day fast. 7 day means always only Mondays and Thursdays. If you began the Bahab, and now we're fasting, and we're crying out to God, and now the rain came, Kedei Reviyah, then is where you make the bracha hatoy v'hameit. And by the way, if you remember the other topic, what happens if it begins to rain on the fast day? So that's the same thing. So a rain that is strong enough to be mafsik, the fast day, because God answered our prayers, that is when we also make the hatoy v'hameit. Meaning, if we didn't begin to fast yet, then you b'chlal don't make a bracha. However, that is the opinion that was said in the name of Rab Ze'eda. But Rab Chizkiah and Rab Nachum, I want you to know that there's Rab Nachum and there's Rab Tanchum. That's another girsa. We're going to read Rab Nachum, but the different versions. And Avada, Bar Avimi. So these three Amoroyim have a Yosvan, they were sitting. Okay, we're going to go with Nachum. Omer Rab Nachum, when Avada Bar Avimi, Ulay Mistabra, Libracha, Nemra, doesn't make sense. He asked him like a rhetorical question, trying to affirm, right, this bracha is made even if there was no fast day. Why do we have to suffer then to appreciate God's goodness? If you never suffer, don't you see in it that God is even kinder to you? It's lechatchila riber. But in other words, he was asking whether we argue with Rab Ze'eda. So Amalei, so they turned to Rav Ada, to Rav Ada Bar Avimi. So he told Rab Nachum, Rav Tanchum, hey, you're right. Upa. You're right means, if he said you're right, what does he mean? He means that I argue with Rab Ze'eda, right? Well, this bracha is not only when it's lahafsik tainus. No, it's called levracha. Now, Rab Chizkiah, the other Amoida, turned to the same Rav Ada Bar Avimi, and he told him, does it not make sense that this bracha was only if you're fasting and then now the rain came and you don't have to fast, you make the bracha. Amaleni told him, yeah, you're right. Like Lahabdul, the joke, right? The rabbi asked him, you're right, and you're right. So the wife says, how can you say you're right and you're right if they're arguing? So he told his wife, you're also right. That's what it sounds like. In other words, whoever asked him the question, looked it in. So the Gemara is saying, Amalei, Lama Omar claimed he hachin. What do you mean? You're telling me yes, but you just told my chaver, you told Rav Nachum or Rav Tachum, you told him the same yes. What do you mean yes, yes? Don't be a yes person. So Amalei, to which he responded, and this is Gavaldik, that when I told Rav Nachum or Rav Tanchum, I agree to you that it is lebracha nemra. Why did I say it to him? Because b'shitas Rabbi, I don't hold that way. But I understood, as we'll see, that's going to be corrected, that his teacher agrees, the teacher of Rav Nachum or Rav Tanchum, his teacher holds that you make this bracha, even if it wasn't lahafsik tainus, even if it's only lebracha. So, and I know that the Talmud, the Rav Nachum always followed the Torah of his teacher. So that's another big thing. It's like if you're knowledgeable enough, someone asks you a shaila, if it's dependent on, let's say, Ashkenazim or Sfardim, you're not going to have the same answer for both people. You're going to tell each one the Masoida that they have. So I told him what I hold his teacher held. I don't hold that way. I agree that it's lahafsik tainus. Problem with that answer is that, hold on, who is the teacher of Rav Nachum? Amar Rav Mana Rav Chizkiyah Mani Rabbi. Who is Rav Nachum's teacher? So they found that it's Rav Ze'eda. We just had it right now. So Amar Lei, hold on, we just said that Rabbi Yossi says in the name of Rav Ze'eda that you only make the bracha lahafsik tainus nemra, and therefore he clarified the misunderstanding. In other words, it's chapping that l'kula alma, you only make the bracha lahafsik tainus, and that's a very important rule, and that's human nature. That when things are good, we should be dancing. We don't make hagoimel. When do you make hagoimel? Oh, you almost died from the surgery. And what about all the people that never had a surgery? We should make hagoimel every day. And but certain brachas, the feeling of gratitude comes about. There was a problem, and now the problem is resolved. Like people that like making shalom, they make the machlokes, then they resolve it. Okay, l'chaim, right. Rav Yehuda Bar Yecheskel Amar. I want you to know that even though in the Mishnah we have the bracha of Atoy V'Ameitiv, that Abba, mein Tate, which is Yecheskel, Mevarach al Yiritas K'Shomim, you know what he would make? Listen to this bracha. Yizgadal v'Yizkadash. You don't even find this in the Gemara. V'Yizbarech, in the Gemara, you know what you find in the Gemara? Yehesh Mei Rabba. Just to know. The Kaddish, which is like the most powerful prayer. But let's go over here. Here we have for rain, Yizgadel, Yizkadesh. That's the wrong Nakudas. Yizgadal, Yizkadash, Yizborech, Yisroimim, Shimcha Malkeinu. I'll call Tipa of a Tipa Sha'at Moirid Lanu, for every drop of rain. Sha'at Mamnion Zumizu. So it's a double thank you. It's a thank you for every drop. And then it's a thank you that no drop combined with its neighboring drop. And that is something, right? That's why we call rain Gevura is Keshamim. What's the Gevura in the rain? The Gevura in the rain is that they don't unite. Each droplet remains by itself. And that's the biggest miracle. Because if one droplet would touch the other, and then the two would touch the third and four, then the rain would destroy the world. And it would destroy everything that you planted. It would make a churban. It's a bracha because when he said, when we're thanking God for the fact that they don't combine with each other, right? So as he quoted the bracha, he quoted the pasuk at the end of his bracha, ki. If God would hold back in the way you would think, then there will be no rain. No, there is rain, but in the rain, God holds back. And that holding back makes it into a blessing. Now, the Gemara just goes in over here. He's using the words yigara as an understanding of withholding. Where do we have that? So the Gemara says, we find that same word, meaning the withholding in Pashas Bichul Kaisai, in the whole topic of a person selling his ancestral field and is redeeming it. So we deduct from the money according to the years prior to Yovel. The nigra me'erkecha. And the nigra means to withhold. So that's where we have the nusach, the understanding of the pasuk in Iyov, ki yagare, the withholding, as we explained, this double blessing that there is rain, but the rain is held back. Gevura is kishamim. It should fall down in a way where it brings a bracha. And Amar Rav Yudin v'loyoi. Not only do we have this concept of God giving and God making sure that they don't touch each other, there's another detail of the hashgacha pratis in the rain, and that is eloshuhu meridim b'midah. In other words, Rabbi Yudin witnessed how every place gets exactly the rain that it needs, which is amazing. Every place gets exactly the amount. I mean, God holds it back. He gives a lot here, he gives a little there, conforming to what it needs. In the Bavli, in Masechta Tainus, we had, I think it was an Amoida, that every morning he would go through his field and he would have different patches, different rows. And he would tell God, this patch today needs water. This patch doesn't need water. And v'kachav. Shenemer, as it says in Iyov, umayim tiken b'midah, that God prepares water with a measure. The measure doesn't only mean that one droplet doesn't touch the other. It also means that every place gets exactly what they need. Another nusach in the bracha of rain. Rabbi Yossi bar Yaakov, Salak, mivakra Rabbi Yudin, Migdalah, he went up to visit Rabbi Yudin from the place of Migdalah, ad duhu kaman lechas mitra. While he was going, rain began to fall. And as he reached the house of Rabbi Yudin, he was lucky to hear Rabbi Yudin's blessings for the rain. And it wasn't the Hatoy v'Hameit that we had in the Mishnah. Ushama kali amar, alfei alef alfen. 1,000 thousands. V'ribei rivvan. 10,000 times 10,000. Ono chayovim lohoides l'shimcha malkein. Al kol tipo sha'at moirid lanu. Sha'at goimel toiva lachayovim. That's a nusach that we say by goimel. That God bestows good even on those who are guilty. In other words, what happens is that when rain falls, rain doesn't only benefit those who are worthy. Rain benefits everyone. Like we had before, that in the schos of Shimon bar Yochai, the schos of Avraham Avinu, the schos of the Achia Shiloini, that's the beauty. So there's a paradox in the rain. On one hand, there's a lot of gemura there. There's a lot of judgment in a good way. For his kashamim, one drop doesn't touch the other. There isn't a abundance that will hurt. Or like he said, that every place it only falls b'midah. Every place gets what it needs. On the other hand, even the unworthy get it. That's the miracle of the rain, that it's like both midas, it's chesed and gevura together. There's an abundance, and then there is a withholding, all for the benefit of us. That's the she'ata goimel toiva l'chayavim amalei. So when Rabbi Yossi walked in, not shalom aleichem, how are you? He was like, whoa. He says hadomin olach. Doesn't say that in our Mishnah. So amalei. I heard it from my teacher, or I heard it from Rab Simon, and that's called Mesoira. So even though it's not so in the Mishnah, that is the way he received the bracha. Now let's go back in all of the three opinions of how much rain has to fall. All of them held that the Batchila, the first of the three periods, has to be Kedei Reviyah. Let's go dive into that. Teaches the Gemara. You know how much that is? It's Maloi Kli. Now again, there's so many different girsois. We're going to go with the brackets. Maloi Kli Macharesha Shel Shlosha Tvachim. It has to penetrate like the plow and the classic plows, knives went into the ground 3 Tvachim. In other words, when it rains, we need for the wetness to go all the way 3 Tvachim into the ground. This is Divrei Rav Meir. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, take a look on how many girsois you have in Rabbi Yehuda. But let's go with the following. That big kasha, he says you can't give the same measurement to all of the lands because you have what he calls hard ground, you have average ground, you have soft ground. And obviously, the same amount of rain will penetrate different, conforming the makabel. So he says, big kasha, 1 tefach is enough. Bebeinanis, 2 tefachim. It's only bisveya land. Sveya means that the land is already moist. There is where we say 3 tefachim. Continues the Braisa. And it's all the same. No, that's his point. But in other words, he's arguing with Rav Meir. Now, Rav Meir's comeback, the way I understand, will be in the Gemara in a moment. But let's continue with the Braisa. Tani, we learned another Braisa. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Maybe this is connected to Rav Meir. Ein locha tefach yored milmayla. Listen to these words. She'ein ha'aretz malek kenegdei shnei tvach. So we have mayim elyonim and mayim tachtonim. I know that they have many meanings. Let's speak initially about the pshat meaning. The pshat meaning is that inside the ground, a peak Kabbalah, the core of the earth, mamish is mayim. And from the mayim comes fire. So the fire in the ground is not the core. And we learned about this. We learned about this a lot on the Bavli. Right? We learned about the Shittin and how David HaMelech found the pathway to get into these mayims, and the mayims began to go up. They came up too high, and they said the 15 shiramalos, they went down. So there is water in the depth of the earth. So he says like this, that there is a very strong relationship, using words in Chassidus, Isarusa de la'ela, Isarusa de la'sat. Physically, Mayim al means when the rain falls, for every tefach that comes milmayla lamato, all the way deep in the ground. Now, this is very deep in the ground. The water in there goes up, not 1, 2. For 1 tefach milmayla, 2 tefachim it goes up. And even though the water is not near the surface, it's very deep in the ground, but it has some sort of trickle up effect. Listen, gewaltige words. Ein locha tefach yored milmayla she'ein ha'aretz mayla kenegdoi. How great Shnei Tvach. Where do we find that? My Tama, what's the source? Pasuk in Tehillim. Tohoim el tohoim koire lekol tzinarecha. So the kol tzinarecha means water channels. The water channels refers to the Mayim Elyonim. When the waters are falling from above, the tohoim, the waters in the tohoim, they notify, say, oh, water is coming from above. We're going to reciprocate by coming up milmata. B'chlal, we all notice that, right? Let's go Chassidim with the Rebbe. When the Rebbe made a little motion, milmayla lamata, people, the reaction was koflaim l'toshia, and it doesn't only mean double. But I want to go back to Rav Meir. I understand that l'chura, we say that Rav Meir, the Chachamim were not yored l'soif datoi. He had such a deep depth, and I think it's connected to this. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda speaking about the revealed. The revealed is, how can you give the same shear? Depends on the earth. And if the earth is very hard, the same water that will penetrate 3 tefachim on moist ground will only penetrate 1 tefach. Rav Meir holds that what we're looking for is not only how much water falls from above. I think that's what it means. Even water that falls 1 tefach, the fact that 2 tefachim come up, that's the 3 tefachim, perhaps. Anyway, says the Gemara Vayter. For Amar Ablevi, Hamayim Elyonim are called male, Zacharim, and Vahatachtonim are called Nekevos. And what's the source of that? When the pasuk uses the words, pasuk in Yeshayahu, Tiftach Eretz, the earth will open up, and that expression is, says Chazal, Kanakeva Hazois, Shehi Poisachas Lafnei HaZachar. And what happens when that happens? So when there's a union between the male and the female, and that's actually why we use the word revia. Revia means the act of cohabitation. Then v'yifru yesha. Then it bears fruit of salvation, and that's an expression v'yifru of zupiri of erivia, which is what happened when it rains. So what's really happening is that there's mayim elyonim, and then there's mayim hatachtonim, and there is a union between them. Again, even though the mayim hatachtonim that goes up is very deep, but they connect somewhere. And both of them together give forth the produce. Utzedaka tatzmiach yachad. And that refers to Yiridas Keshamim. And as the pasuk says, Kani Hashem barasif. I created the rainfall. In other words, and this is really the theme of Basalagani, again, as Gracha Pratis, that the Eibishter had a dira b'tachtonim without us. In other words, if God had a desire, he was here, he was already here. That's not what he wanted. He didn't want for it to only be Mayim Elyonim. He needed for the dira to happen through our avoida. It has to happen that way. And we have to acknowledge that our avoida won't even begin without God's help. So that's the Seder. It's called the Sarusa de Leila. So there was first the dira b'tachtonim. Then Noira Lila b'nei Yadam. That was the plan from the beginning. There had to be sin because God wasn't satisfied with the dira that he made by himself. He wanted us to do it. But how were we able to do it? Because God did it. If Hashem wouldn't have done it, we wouldn't be able to do it. So the Mayim Elyonim falls, and then comes the Mayim Atachlenim, one down and two up. Let's begin on Daf Tzadik Aleph. Says the Gemara, Rab Acha, Tani b'Shem Rav Shimon Gamliel. Indeed, Otazoi, that Lama Nikra Shema Revia. Why do Chazal call the rains the Revia? And the word Revia is Milashon cohabitation. Shehiroi Vas Esaretz, because it penetrates into the ground. Gavaldik. We'll stop over here and to be continued.
Rabbi, the waters that cleaned Beit HaMikdash, was that from the core of the earth, or was that a spring?
No, that was from the Nachal Kidron. That was from a valley. That was not from waters in the core of the earth. But there's no doubt that if this is the way it works. There's waters in the core of the earth. When it goes up and it puts pressure up, then the waters that are already near the surface, they also go up. Everything goes up. Everything pressures up.
Thank you, Rabbi Zens. Shabbos.
I want to say like this, guys, that I'm going to go away for a week. So we're going to resume next week.
Next Monday afternoon.